President Donald Trump will impose steep tariffs on Mexico, Canada and China starting today, aiming to pressure the U.S.'s largest trading partners to accept more migrants and curb the flow of drugs and illegal immigration into the country. The White House announced that goods from Mexico and Canada will face a 25% tariff, while Chinese imports will be hit with a 10% levy, according to Press Secretary Caroline Leavitt. Speaking from the Oval Office on Friday, Trump described the tariffs as a response to what he called the failure of the three nations to prevent drugs and migrants from entering the U.S. The move risks igniting a fresh trade war, potentially more disruptive than the one that shaped Trump's first term. His previous tariffs on Chinese imports triggered retaliatory measures, while levies on steel and aluminum led to countermeasures from Mexico, Canada, and the European Union.
I was just with the president in the Oval Office, and I can confirm that tomorrow, the February 1st deadline that President Trump put into place at a statement several weeks ago, continues. The president will be implementing tomorrow a 25% tariffs on Mexico, 25% tariffs on Canada, and a 10% tariff on China for the illegal fentanyl that they have sourced and allowed to distribute into our country, which has killed tens of millions of Americans. These are promises made and promises kept by the president.
The president yesterday said that last night he was planning to discuss whether an exemption would be made on oil imports. Do you have any information on what decision he made there, or will there be exemptions at all offered under this?
I don't have an update or readout for you on the exemptions, but those tariffs will be for public consumption in about 24 hours tomorrow.
Now, for more on the top stories, let's have Dr. Marek Laskiewicz. He joins us from London. Good to have you, Laskiewicz, today. Now, recent releases by Hamas have been going smoothly, and it's certainly been upheld by Israel due to Hamas's handling of it. What do you think about this?
Well, the good news is there's been a peaceful transfer of hostages from Palestine to Israel and prisoners from Israel to Palestine or have been deported. This is very good news and means that the first phase one of the terms and the negotiations with Israel are going forward very well indeed. There was, of course, a few hiccups, but that's only to be expected. So from this point of view, this is a success.
Think this is putting Hamas in a good PR light, and what would that PR mean to all of this that's happening?
Yes. For Netanyahu, of course, it's been very important to have the hostages released, but for the rest, it's been one huge victory for Hamas. They have not only survived, but are parading quite openly, showing their survival. They've been congratulated for releasing hostages and congratulated on receiving prisoners by the Palestinians and by other people. So for them, it's been one long story of success. And just to add to it all, when they released some of the hostages, they did by their killed leader's house, which added to and underlined just how Hamas have resisted the Israeli attack. And therefore, from a PR point of view, it's been a huge success for Hamas.
I mean, how does PR contribute to all of this? Can you break that down for our audience to understand?
Yes, image. It's what you're perceived to be. One of the key points is that, and as Trump himself pointed out last year, is that Israel, by carrying on the war, slowly became seen by some people as being the oppressor, and therefore it started losing out. The losing out comes in the negotiations in that they're no longer one side has a moral superiority, but quite the opposite. Hamas showed that it was strong and able to withstand all this damage. And the net effect of this is that Hamas is now still the negotiating party for Israel, despite everything that Israel threw at it. And this is the point about PR. It's how you are presented, which gives you leverage in negotiations.
Now, from what we are seeing, should we be hopeful that other stages will be peaceful? And do you see any issues emanating in other states and probable cause of that?
Well, first of all, it has to be Qatar and Egypt especially have to be congratulated for the role of mediators in their pushing for phase two to go ahead and have set everything up. So, yes, I think there will be negotiations of phase two, and yes, there will be dialogue. However, the key problem remains for Israel that they have not succeeded in destroying Hamas, and that therefore these negotiations will simply reinforce Hamas's rule, and that therefore Israel either has to do something or accept that, in effect, it has failed in its primary mission.
Trump had earlier in the week asked that Egypt and Jordan take more Palestinians, considering how delicate this process is. Do you agree Trump should tread lightly? And of course, I'm sure you follow up on the reports of the Arab ministers, coming together to say taking in more Palestinians is not something that they're willing to go by. What is your assessment of this?
The key point is, if the Palestinians were to leave, would they be allowed back in? And history says no, and that therefore there's no way the Palestinians can be taken in by other Arab nations without the possibility of their losing part of their homeland. So they can't leave and don't want to leave, and the Arab nations have joined with them in solidarity, saying they refuse to take them. So this entire initiative by Trump has failed in that sense. However, the question is, in what were his motives? Were they to make sure that the Palestinians would leave, and that therefore this would be, as the Israeli right-wing wants, this type of ethnic cleansing, which will mean that more of Gaza falls into Israeli hands? Or B, was it a point that an American, of course a rich American, sees it as a demolition site and thinks that people should be living outside in hotels before they come back? In other words, it was simply, as you were, a lack of appreciation of the situation. After all, in LA, people are coming back to where they live, but they're still living in hotels. And I think that was on his mind. So let us follow the more pleasant interpretation that he meant it in that sense and was not in fact supporting the Israeli idea of the right of the ethnic cleansing of Palestinians by stealth.
Dr. Laskiewicz, from the stages 1 that we are in now, we're moving to stage 2, stage 3. Are we seeing a light at the end of the tunnel? Do you think that this is going to land well, as it is from your assessment of how this is, continued for 3 weeks so far?
It really hinges on the Israeli right and what leverage it has, and therefore on the Israeli electorate. As things stand, I could see a ceasefire being set up, which would be in effect a status quo antebellum, in the sense that it would go back to where Palestine was a few years ago, very much on the international menu of discussions. I don't see a two-state solution possible as long as Netanyahu is in charge, because he's more or less stated that he's never allowed for it. However, the point about the recent war is that at one point it appeared to Hamas, at least, and certainly to myself, that they were slowly dropping off the international menu because other nations had recognized Israel. And now that Hamas is back again, in this sense, it is much better than it was, say, just before the war, from that point of view. And that therefore I anticipate that there will be a move back to peace. There will be some sort of peace along the lines that there was a situation of 3 years ago. But the two-state solution is impossible so long as Netanyahu remains in power or people like him.
Now let's move to the Trump-US steep tariffs on China, Canada and Mexico, beginning with Canada. This new tariff means Canada can decide to commit itself to European countries as their new trading partners. After all, they have the oil, they have the timber and critical minerals. What do you make of this? I mean, they can decide to, do business with the Europeans.
Well, Canada always could make business with with the EU. It has always got a possibility of doing business elsewhere. And so from that point of view, nothing has changed as a result of the tariffs in the sense of the rest of the world. The question was with America. And really, America, like for that matter, Mexico, are here very much the passive partner in all this. In the sense, it's an American decision to go ahead by Trump. And it is indeed Trump Tariff Day, in a sense, because it's his big day for putting up tariffs to show that he is going to do precisely what he said in his campaign, and is going to put up a sky-high tariffs in order to make sure that America hasn't got cheap imports from Canada, China, and Mexico, and incidentally, the EU in the near future as well.
So what are the implications of this, decision putting 25% tariffs on importers? Is it going to profit America? Are they willing to look within and begin to, patronize their own goods and services? What's the implication for Americans and the implications for the Canadians?
Well, the implications for the Americans are mixed, but in principle, he could benefit from this. If more manufacturing jobs are created and if more of the local demand is satisfied by American producers, then that will be seen to be a success by him, and that this is something that he will underline. Simultaneously, some prices will go up, which is counter to his pledge to reduce prices for consumers in America, but that is going to be more vague. Rising prices, providing they're not sharp, people don't notice so much as unemployment figures, that people have jobs, and that therefore, in this sense, it could work out favorably for him. For the world, including Canada, it's not very good because it reduces world trade. And the more world trade there is, the better we all are off. So if you like, USA is going back to its old policy before World War II of being a world in its own right, which is a pity because it's now the major player. And it can't really back out the rest of the world as it did before, when Great Britain and France were the more important countries. And so from this point of view, it means that for the world, it is a retrograde step, but for Donald Trump, it may well work if more jobs are created as a result, which is likely. And so I think, on balance, he should survive as a result of these tariffs.
Now, one wonders also that the U.S. has the largest, oil-producing resource and all of that, and you wonder why they keep, taking from external sources instead of looking within to begin to produce, or like you said, if those manufacturing companies are brought in, they will be able to do all of this by themselves and all. But one wonders, with such a country in hand, talking about the previous administration, why don't they look within?
That's quite an interesting question. And the reason is that, well, there are several actually. One theory is that the oil producers themselves are buying up oil to store, because you can store oil underground. And that indeed was the case some time back, which will give the USA a measure of independence should the oil market turn nasty for them in the future. There is the other aspect to do with manufacturing and oil, is that quite simply, there are other products on the shelves and people either buy them because they're cheaper or they're better or they're different. And by restricting this choice, and that's in effect what he's doing, he's forcing people to buy American, which should create some jobs. And it is for him a benefit in the short run, so much so that he's not the only country that thinks in terms of tariffs. The problem lies in that there's a subsequent lack of competition and that there is also less of world trade. But for him personally, it should work out correctly. For America, it should work out so-so. The problem that we have here is that other nations lose out by this, and this is not very good for the world. It's the rest of the world which has suffered more, I think, than America in this.
Now, I'm going to ask you the same question I asked in place of Canada. Mexico is also going to be part of that. So on this front, now, Mexico, on the other hand, could also decide to do business with China. Is that a ripple effect? And how does that affect America and Mexico and then China?
You're quite right in saying that the Mexicans can do more business with China. But then again, they always could. The question is, whether America, by cutting itself from the rest of the world with high tariffs, encourages other nations, so to speak, to have better relations, which in terms of politics is precisely what America doesn't want, because obviously there is this ongoing semi-dispute with Taiwan, with China about Taiwan, and that therefore, as you say, this could be a danger. But there's more than that. There's the whole business of the EU coming up and tariffs there as well. And therefore, what will be the effect politically? I think it'll be along the lines you're suggesting, that the rest of the world will be able to do more without America, which is actually what the Chinese and Russians have always wanted, incidentally. They want a multipolar world and not just one dominated by the states. So in the political sense, his tariffs may well backfire internationally, even though nationally within USA there are some benefits.
That's the same thing China did a couple of years ago. Now, let's just take you on this one. Do you think Trump wants America to begin to look within, like I asked you earlier? Plus, who will be on the losing end of all of this? I know you've explained all of that, but once again, can you emphasize in those areas where you feel there could be loopholes for Americans and where they need to tighten their seatbelts as they make this move?
The move itself means, as you say, that they have to look from within. Now, America is a big country, it's a very innovative country, and therefore the effect of tariffs will be positive in the sense more manufacturing and producing jobs should be created. The losing out is the trade, world trade. It is almost certain that China itself can retaliate, which will put us back into the world of the 1930s, where many countries had very high tariffs and trade was much lower than it was after World War II, when primarily America cut its tariffs to encourage this. The effect on the world also is much worse because it slightly reduces competition. You see, the recent AI, America was strutting around how wonderful AI was when suddenly China came in with a cheap version of it, which is superb in world terms because it means that there's dynamism in this market. But of course, in American terms, it means they now have an unpleasant, if you like, competitor in the sense that it's cutting through the profit margins and the ability to make some of the goods. So the net effect is America benefits slightly from the fact it has to look from within and it has the resources and the people to do so. But it should prompt a trade war and far more multilateral relations without the USA, which is politically not too good for the USA. And the trade war per se means that world trade will suffer all round and that therefore the world will be worse off in this effect and in particular in the ability to have a dynamic, competitive marketplace because each country working by itself cuts into that.
All right, then. Thank you so much, Dr. Marek Laskiewicz, for joining us on The World.